Social Security is my lifeblood. It is my lifeline to remaining an independent person and being able to live my life wholly, happily.
Those of us who have worked all our lives and who paid into Social Security do expect Social Security to be there because we paid it. It's not a gift, we've earned.
It's an integral role in household finances. It goes into the checkbook and it's just used for everyday living expenses.
It would have a significant impact on our life because we utilize that money to run our house as well as to do other things that retirement that you would like to be doing in retirement. So that would be a serious cut in our income.
Please welcome AARP's Chief Executive Officer, Joanne Jenkins.
Good morning and welcome to this bipartisan discussion about the future of Social Security. We're honored today to hear from two congressional leaders who have put forth ideas to save and protect Social Security. Republican Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana and Democratic Congressman John Larson, who represents the 1st District of Connecticut. As I look out over this room, I'm so excited to welcome so many AARP volunteers who have traveled from every part of the country: Connecticut, Louisiana, Texas, Oregon, Missouri, South Dakota, Florida, states large and small, urban and rural. Thank you for traveling here today to engage in this critical conversation. And those of you from around the country who are joining us by video at the AARP watch parties. With friends and at home, you represent hundreds of millions of Americans who are counting on their lawmakers to protect and secure and save Social Security. In the 88 years since Social Security was signed into law, it has been the foundation of financial security for hundreds of millions of Americans, providing guaranteed and inflation-protected income throughout their retirement years. It also serves as a critical lifeline for workers who become disabled and for surviving family members after the loss of a spouse or a parent. Today, over 66 million Americans receive Social Security, with another 181 million Americans eligible once they reach retirement age or should they suffer a long-term disability. Without Social Security, millions of older Americans would live in poverty or be unable to cover their living expenses and pay their bills. For 40% of households over 65, Social Security is their most significant source of income, and for 14%, it's nearly their entire income. In the next 10 years, however, the program will face financial challenges that must be resolved. If lawmakers don't act to address them, Social Security could be cut by as much as 20% in 2034. We certainly don't want that to happen, so it is critical for Congress and the President to work together to protect the benefits for those who rely on this crucial lifeline. While these challenges are significant, they are not unprecedented. In the early 1980s, Congress faced a similar situation. Back then, the President and the Congress put their differences aside and agreed to a solution that protected and strengthened Social Security for another half-century. We need that same kind of bipartisan leadership and cooperation today to keep Social Security strong. Failure is not an option. Americans work hard to earn their Social Security, and it's only fair for them to get the money they deserve. Two things are clear. Any solution to protect and strengthen Social Security must win the support of elected officials in both parties. And it must provide American workers and retirees with a long-term solution that both current and future retirees can count on for their financial security. Lawmakers must engage the American people in any discussions about the future of Social Security, and that's just what AARP is helping to do today. Senator Cassidy and Representative Larson are both leaders in their parties, in their states, and indeed in the country. They both have developed ideas and plans to address the challenges facing Social Security. Both men want to see Social Security protected for current and future generations of Americans, and we are excited to hear their visions for achieving that goal. To lead us today in our discussion, we are pleased to welcome the award-winning journalist Lisa Desjardins. Lisa is a correspondent for PBS NewsHour, where she covers news from the U.S. Capitol. She also travels across the country to report on how decisions in Washington affect people where they live and work every day. Lisa specializes in breaking down complex stories and political disagreements into the key pieces that matter, often translating numbers and budgets into straightforward stories for the audience to understand. That makes her the perfect person to moderate our discussion about the future of Social Security today. Please join me in welcoming Lisa to the stage.
Good morning from Washington. Thank you, Joanne, for that wonderful introduction. To summarize my bio, I'm a nerd. That's basically what she's saying. I want to welcome everyone here to a national conversation about Social Security. That means this is a national conversation about seniors in America, everyone who is a senior now, but also everyone who hopes to be one, everyone who loves a senior and cares about them. So surely that is all of us. This is coming at a critical time, obviously, for our country in many ways, but fiscally important decisions are being made or not made right now that will affect all of us for generations. That's why we're here today, and I want to thank everyone in the watch parties around the country, though I will tell the folks in Ohio we are sad we do not have pancakes here, as I understand that you do there, so well done to you in Ohio. We will have 3 segments today, 2 with the key lawmakers that you just heard about, and we will also have one talking to recipients of Social Security who have come here for this conversation. And we begin with Senator Bill Cassidy, Louisiana. Thank you for coming. Great. We see each other in often less dignified circumstances at the U.S. Capitol when you are being surrounded by members of the press like myself. So this is a very nice setting. Senator Cassidy, as many of you know, is himself a physician, one of 4 physicians, I believe, in the U.S. Senate currently. He's a gastroenterologist by trade, but I will tell you, in observing Senator Cassidy on the Senate floor, I think he might secretly be a sociologist. I really think this is a senator who I have seen carefully watching and observing lawmakers working across the aisle to try and understand where there are potentials for movements in issues. He has, as some of you know, a plan for Social Security, which involves some elements of the old Simpson-Bowles plan, which means raising the retirement age, getting rid of the cap on the income required for payroll taxes or moving that cap in some way. But perhaps the most, I think, innovative part of your plan would be a wealth fund. We're going to come back to that in a second. But first, I want to ask you about the challenge itself of Social Security. We heard Joanne talk about that. The system is set to the trust fund will run out of money in just 10 years. If nothing is done, we understand that we could face cuts to benefits of 24% for everyone in just 10 years. Can you help us understand what that would mean?
Yeah, so thank you, Lisa, and thank you to AARP for hosting this. It's the first challenge is how do you acquaint people with the understanding that under current law, when the trust fund goes insolvent in 8 years, under law, there will be a decrease in benefits to match the income. Here's the income, here's the outgo. And right now the trust fund is making up the difference. And the trust fund is shrinking, at which point outgo, which means the benefits people are receiving, decreases to the amount of income. That will be a 24% cut. I'm on a radio program in Shreveport, and the hostess says, well, that's okay, I'll be grandfathered in or grandmothered in. I say, no. People who are currently receiving will see that 24% cut. Now, what makes it worse, Lisa, is that apparently if you're running for president, you have to deny there's a problem. If you're running for president, you can't tell people there's going to be a 24% cut. You have to tell them that there's no problem whatsoever, and don't worry, I'll protect your social. Doing nothing is endorsing a 24% cut for people currently receiving and those who will receive in the future. That's the biggest challenge.
I'm going to come back to your plan in a second. My question for you, I know that you're having these conversations and have had them for a long time with your fellow senators. We know that seniors in America are not just a powerful force right now, but they're going to be an even greater force moving ahead politically. There will be greater needs also for seniors. I know AARP has an article this month out talking specifically about the numbers, and they are remarkable. Do you think senators, particularly that you're talking to, understand the true crisis that could be coming and the population that it could affect?
We ended up on our proposal with 7 Republicans and 7 Democrats and others who are coming on board. They understand. They understand that the third rail should be allowing a 24% benefit cut for those who are currently receiving and those who will receive in the future. And they understood that, and they made a commitment to work together. So I will say, among the folks I worked with, absolutely they understand that. I'll also say that we were making progress on the House side. Both parties interested in coming up with a solution. So I think there's that awareness. Right now is the absence of presidential leadership. It takes both parties, both houses, and a president who is willing to go there. And right now, our leading candidates are not willing to go there.
I mean, I have seen the Senate push presidents on issues. War powers is an example of that. I think I'm going to ask this question to your Democratic House colleague later in a different way. I want you to imagine a strange world. This is a bit of a challenge. Go with me for a second here. A world where Democrats do not exist. So let's talk about the Republican Party that you're in. I know.
I'm not going to touch that one.
I gave him a second, and perhaps wisely so. But, and I'm not trying to make this partisan, but you are a Republican. I know you work in a bipartisan way. We will talk about that. But why is it that Republicans, you've got 7 right now, why isn't it the entire party worried about this? This is a serious crisis ahead. It will get worse if we do nothing. It will get harder to deal with. What is the issue in the Republican Party? And I don't hear your candidates, your presidential candidates, talking about it.
First, a couple things.
Yeah.
Maybe everybody would have gotten there. It takes a long time to socialize complicated concepts. And you don't just walk up to somebody and say, hey, by the way, I got a great idea. And they're going to look at you like, well, that's fantastic. I got a great idea, too. No, you got to work. You got to meet their concerns. You've got to take their concerns, and you've got to say, OK, we can shape it. No, this is not practical, et cetera. One thing we did, for example, to help with that, I had some bright young man who created the spreadsheet, brought in all these things, all these different tables about lifespan expectations, the increasing expectation of lifespan, different age groups, different racial groups, how it's going to happen with them. And so we'd bring somebody in, and they would say, I have an idea. We'd plug in the idea, and they'd say, oh, my idea doesn't work. But it took us months to get that spreadsheet. And then with Senate schedules, it takes us weeks to get an appointment. And then where we all can get together. And then they have to have an hour session with us. It takes a long time. Now, as regards our presidential candidates, I don't agree with some of the approaches, but Mike Pence is talking about it. Asa Hutchinson, Chris Christie, Nikki Haley. That's just coming off the top of my head. So, because I've not looked at each of their positions. So I would argue that there are those who were on the podium at that last debate who are talking about it.
Okay.
Now, by the way, I was tired and it's late, and so I texted a friend. I'm going to bed about halfway through. They haven't talked about social. I wish they would. And he texts back. He goes, "No, I'm glad you went to bed because they just brought up UFOs." So it is difficult
Chris Christie,
to
that's what he got. Yeah.
It's difficult to insert it into the conversation, even in a presidential debate.
Let's talk about your plan. In particular, I want to talk about your idea to borrow in the next decade, 5-6 years, a large sum, 1.6, I believe, trillion dollars. 1.5 trillion. I'm never sure about the rounding in Washington. I always worry about that. To borrow that money and use that as a fund, invest it over more than 50 years, let it accrue, and then use that to secure Social Security long term. Can you explain that briefly? And then I have a lot of questions about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about status quo. The Social Security Trust Fund takes the money that we pay into it, and by law, it keeps it either in cash or it puts it into treasuries. That's the Social Security Trust Fund. Now, that is the absolute worst investment you could possibly have right now. The inflation, the interest rate we're getting on those treasury notes could be 1%, 2%, 4%, but inflation is 6 to 7%. We are losing value on the cash and treasuries that are in the Social Security Trust Fund. By law, we're losing that value. Anyone who's in a 401k, anyone who's in a defined pension fund, your fund doesn't do that. If you're a Canadian, your fund doesn't do it. If you're a European, your fund doesn't do it. The only fund that does it is the Social Security Fund. So what we do is we create a separate fund. We don't mix the two. There's no social dollars coming to our separate fund. And in our separate fund, we get 1.5 trillion. You mentioned we borrow. We could sell off government assets. There's a lot of empty buildings that we pay to maintain that we never use. So we could sell, but we raise 1.5 trillion and we put it into this different fund, the Save and Secure It Fund. And as we do that, we invest it in the strength of the American economy. And so we could put it in the stock market, for example. Now, at the same time, we repeal the law that would cut benefits by 24%. We repeal that law. In the interim, we do borrow to pay scheduled benefits. So the woman who was hosting me, Erin McCarty in Shreveport, and she's 65, she will not have to worry about not being grandfathered in. She will still get her scheduled benefits. But we use the money in this trust fund as it grows over time, invested in the nation's economy, to offset the borrowing. And as this grows, it ends up addressing 70% of the shortfall associated with our promised benefits. There's still 30%, by the way, we have to address. And we have dials. That's why we need a president. He may want to turn this one or she may want to turn that one. But the 70% is addressed with this, and all we're doing is what every other 401k, every other national pension fund does. We invest in the strength of the economy as opposed in treasuries, which are losing value every day.
As we sit here, though, our audience all know that we are on the brink potentially of another government shutdown. We will see what happens with that. But the crux of the issue in the House is about borrowing. How do you convince Congress to enter some borrowing? How do you actually get that done? How do you get this thing off the ground?
So, Lisa,
and when are we going to see text of it?
So, Lisa, so first, now she's one question at a time. And she
I know,
puts three
I
at
do.
once,
It's
right?
terrible. I know. It's
so
a White House
first,
reporter trick. I shouldn't have done it.
Let's first talk. When you say borrowing, what you really mean is our nation's indebtedness.
That's correct.
So the unfunded accrued liabilities of Social Security, those promises made to us as Americans, that accounts over the next 70 years for about 1/5 of our nation's indebtedness. That single program is 1/5 of our nation's indebtedness. With our plan, we take care of that 1/5. At the end of the 70 years, we have the money. In fact, if this goes like the actuaries predict it might go, we will evergreen the fund, which is to say that never again will we worry about a Social Security shortfall. It always will have enough revenue coming in from the investments to pay scheduled benefits. That's pretty remarkable.
It would be.
That is a pretty good anti-deficit program. And that also, did I tell you? No, I didn't. She didn't ask. We also have a poverty alleviation program in here, in which the actuaries say that this is the most powerful poverty alleviation program for the elderly since Social Security was originally passed. We repeal the retirement earnings test, which if you go back to work after you're on social, you get $1,000 a month cut in your social payment. Why are you going back to work? Which, by the way, would help workforce availability because the boomers, I'm a boomer, we got a lot of work left in us at age 65, but you kept me $1,000 on my social, maybe I'll just sit home and fish. And one more thing, we also repeal weapon GPO, windfall elimination provision and government pension offset, which affects my state, affects California and Texas and Illinois. So I say all that because we've got things in here that make the program stronger, as well as address our nation's indebtedness. Yes, there is short-term borrowing, but that short-term borrowing is accounted for.
Just a few seconds left, unfortunately, for this part of our program, but quick question, I'll follow up. When do you think we might see your plan in some written form, and what is your timeline? Do you want action on this before the next presidential election?
It will not happen before the next presidential election because President Biden has made it clear that he's not going to act on it. We briefed the White House on 4 separate occasions. They have said this publicly. I'm not telling you anything which is not known, for multi-hours. And by the way, we're not going to put out paper because there are dials. We need a president who will say, okay, we're going to turn this dial or that dial. I can tell you how we originally construed it, but that's what a president's about. The president's going to say, we want to turn this up and we want to turn that down. So we need a president to come up with the final language. But President Biden made it clear that he's not going to address this. He didn't, when in his State of the Union speech, he did not speak about the bipartisan plan that had 7 senators from each party that he had been briefed on. Rather, he spoke about a single senator's plan that he had retreated from. As we walk out, a Democratic colleague says, well, he's running for re-election, attacking Republicans on social, and our plan is dead for this Congress. So my hope is we can do it next Congress.
Okay. Senator Bill Cassidy, the senior senator from Louisiana, thank you so
Lisa.
much for your work. I'll see you up there. Great, thank you. Now, excellent feature of the AARP, unlike some in Washington, is they are very focused on the human part of these issues here. So the AARP has been speaking to thousands across this country on this issue, as many of you know, some of you watching, and we'd now like to hear from some of them on their thoughts on Social Security.
I have to say, the idea that Social Security, which I budget for my every month's expenses, if that were to be reduced, I really don't know exactly how I would make ends meet. And I would hate in my 70s and my 80s to have to go back and work so that I can fill in that gap, because Social Security is an amount that I can rely on.
63 years, and I paid into it, and my feeling is that it's something that they owe me because I paid into it. I'm not even sure what the equation is in reference to their contribution, but I know my contribution has been significant. It still is, because I'm paying into Social Security while I'm getting Social Security.
For our household, my husband's Social Security is critical. Again, it helps us to supplement those items that we need in our household and to pay bills.
So if our lawmakers don't take action on Social Security, it's going to make a huge difference on my budgeting, what I'm going to enjoy in retirement, and also how I'm going to pay for my medications.
And it is now my honor to talk to 3 of the people that have been dealing with this issue in their lives and in others' lives, 3 prominent AARP volunteers and members. First, I want to talk with you, Tony Vola of Iowa. Introduce yourself, and I want to ask you, what does Social Security mean to you?
Thank you, Lisa. My name's Tony Vola, state of Iowa, 20-year plus AARP volunteer. Social Security, I got a 2-part answer to it. One's a personal one, because I'm drawing Social Security. And retirement is a plan. You have to plan for it. 401k, savings. If you're fortunate, I'm retired military, so I have a pension, and Social Security. The cut in Social Security is a disruptor in my part. However, during my life, I've also run an in-home care company where 70% of the individuals were on Medicaid, where Social Security was their only income. You cut that 20%, that's a crisis. That's not a disruptor to them, that's a crisis. We're talking about the basics of life. So I look at it this way. We've done our part, time for Congress to do their part.
You know, it's interesting that AARP article I mentioned earlier that's out this month said 1 in 5 people over 65, for them, Social Security is 75% or more of their income. So that's exactly what you're talking about. Next to Nora Dowd Eisenhower of Pennsylvania. Please introduce yourself, and what does Social Security mean to you?
Thank you, Lisa. My issue around Social Security is that I have been counting on it for many years. I've seen it support my grandparents, my parents, and now it's my turn. I'm really proud that I am able to say I am 70 years old in December and I will start collecting Social Security. I waited. I read the data, I listened to AARP, and I've been a member for many years.
And you're right there.
And I'm there.
Right there.
And I waited. I did it the right way. And I expect Congress to support everybody else around the country who has been relying on it. One other thing, I am from Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. I see people every day for whom Social Security is their only income. They are also very proud of that. They live within their means. And a 25% cut or a 20% cut or any cut unpredictably in 10 years is a crisis. I agree, Tony.
Alfred Mason joins us from Louisiana. Yes. Just met your senator a few minutes ago.
Yes.
Please introduce yourself. Tell us what Social Security means to you.
Okay, well, first of all, my name is Alfred Mason. I'm Louisiana State Volunteer President. Social Security is a major part of our income. We've been married quite a few years. We've been retired quite a few years. I'm fortunate, I guess, in the fact that we've been retired close to 28 years.
Well
Without
done.
Social Security, I'd have to find a job. And at this point in life, do you know anyone that would hire an 83-year-old man to do any kind of a job? So it is indeed a very major portion and part of our income.
I know you started paying into Social Security, I think in 1950.
1958.
And your job was?
My very first job, I washed pots at F.W. Woolworth for 6 years.
Yep.
And I worked until 1995, where I retired with God's grace as a department manager for one of the nation's largest check printers. So it is indeed a major part of our income.
As you've all said, you've been paying into the system. Everyone in this room, I think, most everyone has been, with jobs from starting at Woolworth on up. You heard Senator Cassidy a few minutes ago say he doesn't think there can be action on Social Security for at least another year. You know, you can say who you blame. Obviously, it doesn't seem like anyone is really trying to push votes on this right now. I wonder what you thought when you heard that, for example. I don't know. Yeah, Nora.
It's disappointing. This is not a partisan issue. It's a bipartisan issue. It's a nonpartisan issue. I think more accurately, everyone cares about this. The plan that we heard today is a starting point, and I want more around that. I want to hear what everybody's plan, whatever the proposal is. I'd like to see it in bill form, but I'm really happy to see this conversation. I think that's a really important part of what we're doing here today.
Tony, what'd you think?
Unfortunately, not surprising. As a volunteer for AARP, we've been touching on this for 15 plus years. And to get action out of our elected leaders is almost impossible, which is, I agree, totally unfortunate, but it's a fact of life. I hope they just don't wait until it's a crisis and then do something. Let's do something ahead of time where it's much easier.
It feels like we're almost at that point, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And
yes.
So Alfred, I kind of wonder to you, how urgent does this feel to you now?
First of all, let me say, it's not a political issue in my mind. It's a people issue. Regardless of what political party you are a part of, if you keep laying down and God keeps getting you up, you're going to need some assistance from somewhere. And this is our major source of assistance. And I agree wholeheartedly. Why should we wait until it is a crisis? We are in one right now. We're about to face one at the end of this month. So why do we have to wait until we're pushed against the wall? We can't wait until the end of the month to pay rent, buy groceries, the necessary things of life. Don't wait. If you've got children, when they say they're hungry, they don't care where it comes from. What they want is food.
There's some interesting generational context here, I think. You all are part of a very big generation of seniors right now. There are obviously many more coming, but I wonder if you feel, especially people who have worked on state levels in prominent positions for seniors' issues. I know Variety for Labor issues, all of you have been advocates for seniors in your communities. Do you feel like there's a growing sense of the political power of seniors or no? And I wonder because I think it impacts whether lawmakers act on Social Security? I don't know.
I think there
Nora.
is a growing sense,
Yeah.
and the numbers are inescapable. Whether you're a nerd
Yeah.
or not, you can see this population growing, this population votes, we know that. I think, though, it's really important for us to say that this affects all generations. My children, my people that I talk to in the community that are supporting older adults, seniors, they don't think Social Security is going to be there for them. That's a crisis right now, today, for them. I counted on that all my life. This is going to be secure. Yes, we had whatever happened to the 80s, but I believed it would be there for me and for everyone else in my generation, so I wouldn't have to rely on my children. So I think that that's a really important piece of it. Yes, it's a huge and growing population, but this is an important issue for people of all ages.
I saw you all nodding, and I know that there are also grandchildren that some of you have. Do your kids, do your grandchildren believe that Social Security will be there for them, Tony?
Unfortunately, my grandchildren are still very young.
Oh, how old?
So they're not there yet.
How old are your
But I can
grandkids?
tell
Oh, yeah.
you that my children
Yeah.
aren't planning on it in any way, shape, or form. I keep telling them it will be there.
Right.
It will be there. It has to be there. As far as your earlier question, do I see a groundswell or more seniors, looking at this? I would say no. Unfortunately, I wish more would rise up and make sure they speak. When I go to the political candidates coming through the state of Iowa, I'm the only one asking the question.
That's good.
And
Oh, really?
we need more people involved to put the pressure on the elected officials and the president.
I did notice that there are some swing states in this group
Just a few.
that are important in presidential elections, for sure. Yes. Tell me about in Louisiana. There is a real concern here about these cuts, and you all have talked about it. I spoke about it, the senator, about poverty. We know with this country, I don't know if people who've studied it know that before Social Security, before Medicare, there were just profound levels of poverty for seniors in this country. Can you talk about concerns you have for people in Louisiana, what this could mean? If we've talked about the 24% number, but can you give me some specifics of what we're talking about?
I think, and I'll use myself and my wife as an example, I think it's a critical point. And I agree that we need to have more conversation. Thank God for this organization.
That's right.
I remember stating to a friend of mine that the reason that I got involved with AARP is because I believe in what AARP was talking about and the things that they were doing. As we look at these issues that we're talking about right now, whether the people realize or not or understand, and your original question was about seniors getting involved. If they're not, they need to be. And we need to continue to put it out there so that they understand what they're actually faced with. The voting strength of this country right now is the 60-plus community. So if we don't make some noise, what's the old saying? If you don't toot your horn, it won't get tooted.
Yeah, that's it.
If we don't say something, I told my children when they were small, if you don't holler, we don't know you're hurt. And we're at that point. We're hurting. We need to holler.
Nora, you are, I believe, the executive director, tell me if I'm wrong, of the Mayor's Commission on Aging.
That's right. I'm
Philadelphia,
still
correct?
working in Philadelphia. Yes.
All right. Can you talk about the effects, you think, on local governance if Social Security on a national level starts to falter or has to be cut? What would that mean?
It's a crisis of sort of immeasurable proportions. We know the individuals and the personal stories. People relying on this for their only income. People relying on Social Security for 75% of their income. But the reality is this is also an economic development program. This money goes into your account and is spent. It's spent on groceries, it's spent on medical needs, it's spent on daily cost of living. 25% cut to that for no reason. We can plan ahead. We know in 10 years that's going to happen. It's creating such anxiety across populations, for people, and across government. I don't know what that would do in Philadelphia and across Pennsylvania. It could be devastating.
it's a very serious matter, but I am thinking, because it's football season, of Philadelphia Eagles fans, and I am right, exactly. And I'm like, Philadelphia is not a city that we need problems with.
No,
we don't
we had a
need
very good-
angry Philadelphians.
You're absolutely right.
Don't need it.
It's a tough city. We're great fans, I think. We just had a great Phillies game yesterday, so we're very excited about that. And you're right, Eagles season has started.
Yeah, we know college football season in Iowa is well underway. It's a whole different matter. But Tony, I want to ask you a little bit about your experience in the military. I believe you're a 21-year veteran of the military, like a lieutenant colonel, something like that.
21 years.
We have a minor difference because my father was a Navy captain, not an Air Force, but I think we can get along, as we said, nonetheless. That is a place of discipline. That is a place where you get complicated things done. Can you talk about looking at this Social Security problem and the politics around it, the inaction from our government leaders compared to sort of how you saw things in the military? Obviously, two different systems, but is there something that you learned from the military that should apply to our leaders getting things done?
Yes is the short answer.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, when I look back at my military career, you had a problem, you go solve it. That's it. Because if you don't solve it, you're risking a lot of things to include life. Needless to say, in Social Security, if we don't solve it, you're risking life again. So you go out, you figure a solution, you get it done. And that's what we need to get Congress to do, is just, you know, in the name of a famous comedian, just get her done.
We like to just look at Washington, and, you know, I'm sort of up there with these lawmakers every day, and I worry that sometimes it's been so many years of gridlock here in Washington that we kind of just accept it. You know, oh, this is political intraction. It's very difficult. I wonder how you all look at that, and how, if there's any way that you guys can process. Do you just think that our politics are too difficult right now to get big things done? Or is there a problem with how we assume that there's a problem? Does that make sense? It's kind of a PBS question. Yes. And so, I don't know. Nora, I see you nodding.
Yeah.
You know what I'm getting at, right?
I do know what you're getting at.
Are we part of the problem because we accept this, or how do we get these guys?
The problem is complex.
Yes.
Let me just say that.
Yes.
We know the difficulties in Washington and in state capitals around the country. There's a great divide. The issues around Social Security, like other issues that impact this population, whether it was the creation of Medicare Part D years ago, just think about it. We had a Medicare plan that didn't have a pharmacy plan until 2005. That happened. I think that the issues that impact this population, and Social Security really is one of them, are where we can find bipartisan unity. The fact that you have 7 senators from each side, I think, is very significant, and I think we need to build on that.
One of the thinking on Capitol Hill is that if you touch Social Security now in the short term, if you change the retirement age, even if that's years out, or if you change the benefits, or maybe if you change who has to pay more for it, that in the short term you will do too much political damage. How do you guys respond to that idea?
No pain, no gain. There has to be something. We have to talk about it at least. Here are the proposals out there.
I agree wholeheartedly. If you just let it go as it is going, we just heard where it's going. And if it gets to that stage, whether you are Republican, Democrat, Independent, it doesn't matter. It's going to affect everybody. And everybody means everybody. If we don't reach a point where we can put people ahead of positions, we're going to be in a world of hurt down the road.
And Tony?
Yeah, I want to go back a little bit and answer this question in the same way. What it takes is leadership. We need leadership to step up and do something. I mean, thank goodness the senator and the representative coming on here today are showing that leadership. But we also need it at the top. And this isn't Republican, Democrat, it's across the board. Stand up, do what you need to do, and let's get it done, because we have a lot of people depending upon you.
If there was a plan that said seniors now would have to take maybe a small benefit cut or would be affected in some small way to secure the future of Social Security, that's a big hypothetical. The details matter, obviously. But is that something you all would consider personally? Do you think that's something that other seniors you know would consider?
No.
Yeah, Alfred?
No.
Yeah.
That's bottom line answer? No. There isn't a person that I know that are on Social Security at this stage in their lives and that the economy as it stands right now could stand any cut. My daughter, I didn't find this out until some years ago. She used to check on my wife and I on a regular basis. And I finally found the answer as to why she kept doing it. Because we changed our diet a bit, she thought we didn't have the funds to eat. And when we realized this, we're saying, whoa, where'd you get that from? So the perception. And if you take away the perception and look at the reality, what are your chances? If you take any cut away from any of us who are currently on Social Security, it will have a major effect on us. Not just us, but our families.
Nora.
Why start there? Why start with a benefit cut? We've just heard a proposal that has sort of a complex plan. Why start with a benefit cut for people who have counted on this for years and years? I think that's wrong-headed.
Well, especially because we have a runway still. We have an 8-9 year runway to figure this out. It used to be a longer runway, by the way. You know, we knew this was coming, for sure. Do you think there's a disconnect between generations here where you see the problem, you see it coming, and I hear your children and saying, I'm just going to take it for granted that I won't get this, rather than that those next generations realizing what's at stake for them and them fighting for it. How do you think there's a disconnect there? Is that part of the problem? I don't know.
I don't know if there's a disconnect.
Okay.
I think it's how they look at life. And if you see that there could be a problem out there in life, I'm going to figure out my way around that particular problem. And I think
it's pragmatic.
Younger generation now are saying, hey, may not be there, let me figure out how I'm going to do it, just in case.
I think there are many disconnects between generations. And I think that when I, myself, was younger, I never thought I'd get to the age of Social Security. I'm not saying that that's rational, but it's true. It wasn't until I sat down. I knew it was always there. I got the annual notices to tell me how much I could expect when I retired. But it really wasn't until this past year or two that I actually looked at, what am I going to get? How does that compare? How does that play out as part of my portfolio for retiring, which includes still working? So it's a complex equation, but I don't think I was concerned about it in my 30s, and I don't think that adults today are as concerned about it as they should be.
I want to again say hello to everyone watching this around the country. We have watch parties around the country, and we know that you all are having this conversation as well in your communities. I can speak for myself that my mother-in-law in Connecticut, Social Security is a major part of her life. And in our family, it's a situation where we would help her, we'd do anything for her. But she worked her whole life, and she does not want us helping her. She wants to live off of the income that she believes she earned, And I think there was one month even she had lost her Social Security check, or she didn't come, and it was a profound difficulty for her. And it was so hard for her to call me and say, Lisa, I think I might need a little help this month. It ended up she didn't need it, and she said, and I said, listen, we're your family. No big deal. And she said, no, it is a big deal for me, because I worked all my life. Yeah.
May I just interject where you're saying, I think the big issue here, or the big point that may be overlooked, is that most of us that are over 50, we were raised to be independent. We were raised
I see the whole room nodding with you, yes.
We were raised to stand on our own feet.
Right.
And regardless of the amount of your income from Social Security or from where, we were raised that way. Today's young people don't have that mindset. Today is today. They don't worry about tomorrow. But the independence, if nothing else, is one of the more important issues that we as seniors deal with. I want to be on my own as long as I can be on my own. I never, ever, and I've said this to my children, I've said it to my wife, I want to live as long as I can, but I don't want to be a dependent or a problem for my children. And being independent means whatever income is mine, I expect it.
And independence, by the way, a foundational and critical part of our identity as Americans
Exactly.
as well, right? So, Alfred, Nora, Tony, I can't thank you enough. That was a really wonderful conversation. Thank you all.
Thanks, Lisa. Thank you.
Before we get to our next guest and some audience questions, I want to apologize. First of all, we did not have time for audience questions during Senator Cassidy's time on stage, but we will get to some with the next guest. Before that, though, we want to hear from more voices from AARP around the country.
I had a medical situation and I had to take early retirement from my job. So from a period from, let's say, I was 62 to 65, since I had to pay insurance, my lifeline was Social Security. I basically survived on that. I didn't want to go into my retirement savings because there would have been penalties. So it certainly was a lifeline for those few years before I was able to tap any other sources.
If Social Security were cut, it would be a big drain on me personally, family-wise. There are so many things that I would not be able to do. And never mind talk about the house. I would have no social life. I mean, it will impact every area of my life if Social Security were cut.
So when I look into retirement, Social Security plays a huge role into that plan of will I have the funds so that my wife and I can enjoy our life as we had hoped, and why we've worked these years and paid into the system to make sure we now can enjoy and have a good time.
It's my money. I saved it over 50 years. Not only did I put in what people pay when they work for an employer, but the majority of my life, I worked for myself. So I paid both the employer and the employee portion. So it's my money. I saw it as an insurance policy, bank account, all rolled up into one.
And joining me now to continue this conversation with Congress, this national conversation about Social Security, is Congressman John Larson of the 1st District of Connecticut.
Good to be with you, Lisa.
Good to see you.
Good to be here.
Do you want to make the DC gridlock joke about traffic today, or should I make the joke? Thank you for coming across town. It is not always easy, especially on what could be a long week in Congress, looks like.
Honored to be here.
Excellent.
It looks like it's going to be a long couple of days in Congress. Yeah, actually.
I'm so glad that it is you who is here, because you have worked on this issue for years. You have a bill that you have been presenting, I think, for at least 3 Congresses now. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's 4, but
full legislative text. This is the 4th Congress then. Your plan to raise Social Security, we're going to come back to in a second, but we're talking about the urgency of this problem. When you talk to members of Congress, do you feel like there is a sense of urgency here, that they realize cuts will be coming to Social Security if nothing is done?
Well, I think Martin Luther King coined the phrase, the fierce urgency of now. And, you know, unfortunately, I do not think a lot of members have that fierce urgency of now, because even though it's now less than a decade away when the fund will be depleted 20% across the board, the fund's solid, but 20% cut. And when you consider this, Congress hasn't enhanced Social Security in more than 52 years. Richard Nixon was president of the United States. The last time there was an enhancement, I know some of you are going, well, wait a minute, what about Ronald Reagan and Bob Dole and Tip? Yeah, they did extend solvency, but they did that by cutting benefits. You say, well, wait, what do you mean? What benefits did they cut? They raised the age. And as AARP knows, for every year you raise the age, that's a 7% cut in benefits. And now the Republican Study Committee and others are suggesting, yeah, what we have to do is raise the age to 70. Now look at it, if you're healthy and you're still working or whatever your case may be, and you can wait to 70, that's a great idea and should be followed through. But if you raise the age to 70, That's a 21% across the board cut to recipients, with the idea being if you're living longer, so therefore we ought to raise it. If you're living longer, you're going to need less money to live on? How does that possibly make any sense whatsoever? And that's why I think it's so, the fierce urgency is to vote, and vote now. Put your proposal out there. We hear a lot of good ideas, et cetera, but how many actually reduce it to a bill, debate it, put it into a committee and say, here's what we're going to do, here's how it's spelled out. What's your solution?
Let's talk about your solution.
Yes, let's do that.
Your solution is great. Your solution is revenue-based. You are talking not about cutting benefits. In fact, you would increase benefits in your plan, right? But you do this through different types of revenue increases. One deals with that cap on the income right now for who pays payroll taxes. You would ultimately phase that all the way out. But you would also include other taxes like capital gains taxes, different kinds of revenue coming into Social Security. I have a very nerdy question for you. Now, you're probably familiar with Representative Dave Schweikert of Arizona. He speaks every week, I think, on Social Security on the floor. It's his thing. Yes.
Yeah, he's a great data person.
He's a great data person. He has a number that he touts saying that we will need some $600 billion, for example, to shore up Social Security. But the payroll tax fix, that only gets you to 100 and some billion. Are you sure that your plan has enough money? And we're talking about massive amounts of money.
I'm not an actuary, but the actuaries are sure that it does.
All right.
So, and let's talk about this for a second. First, let's talk about what the problem is. The problem is Congress, and Congress not voting. And AARP ought to be outraged and say, hey, listen, how about you guys vote? How about what you do, what you're elected to do, that you take an office and pledge to the Constitution and show up and do your job and vote? Everybody wants to say how much they love Social Security and, oh, don't listen to these programs, et cetera. We care deeply about Social Security. You do? Where's your bill? Where's your proposal? 5 million Americans get below poverty level checks from Social Security. And in Congress, we're talking about, again, giving greater tax breaks to the wealthy, and we won't even take care of people that have paid into a system all their lives. When you talk about the challenges of the debt inequality across the nation, you don't have to look any further than Social Security. And this is something that the president can't do through executive order, that the judicial system, the Supreme Court, isn't going to litigate. This is only something that Congress can do. And all you're asking them to do is vote. And if you got a better idea, put it forward. But you're right, our bill does say, hey, it's long overdue to enhance these programs, starting with those 5 million who get below poverty level checks from their federal government, having paid in all their lives. President Biden calls it a sacred trust. Well, it's a sacred mistrust when so many people, and as I look around this audience, the majority of those people getting below poverty level checks are women. And the majority of them are women of color. And so why wouldn't we have a new floor for Social Security that's 125% of poverty and immediately lift 5 million people out of the depths of poverty? It's not like they're going to be wealthy and they're going out and getting stock options with this. As you know, the average Social Security payment for a male is $18,000, for a female is $14,000. These programs need to be improved. For 40% of Americans, Social Security is the only benefit that they have. Talk about wealth disparity. This is how Roosevelt intended to adjust it. And frankly, Eisenhower and Nixon adjusted it. So this is very bipartisan. And let's focus on doing the right thing for the American people in this case And I would argue this is the best economic development plan we have, too.
We've heard about this from people on the ground talking about
They're
that
absolutely
importance.
right.
And we've also heard a sort of cry from the people here for leadership. It seems to be the question. I think that's what you're saying as well. You have been a leader on this issue. This is my question. I asked it to Senator Bill Cassidy in a different way. He didn't know quite what to make of it. So just come with me for a second.
Sure.
Imagine a world where Republicans don't exist. So just for a minute, we need both Republicans and Democrats. I'm not wishing anyone out of the world, but just imagine in your world. And I want to say this because I'm not trying to be too much of a pugilistic journalist here, but you are a Democrat.
Yeah.
You are talking about getting a vote on a bill, but your bill has not gotten a vote. It did not get a vote in the Democratic House, did not get a vote in committee, did not get a vote on the floor when you had a House Speaker of your own party. Why is it that Democrats, we know hundreds are on your bill, but why isn't it that Democrats are not doing more on this issue to lead?
Well, when you say why aren't Democrats, I am a Democrat,
right?
And
I know.
We're leading
why,
on
I should
this
say, why
issue.
aren't other Democrats? Why aren't top Democrats
Well, we had
doing more?
208 Democrats that signed on to the bill. But there were some Democrats who went and said, we already have taken on major issues to the Speaker, said we already have taken on major issues on health care and others, and we're being threatened by our Republican counterparts that they are going to say that we're for another massive tax increase. And so people got nervous, and the bill was scheduled for a vote in the Ways and Means Committee and got pulled, much to my chagrin. The problem hasn't gone away, and the advocacy still exists there, et cetera. We have over 180 Democrats that have signed on to the bill. And if you talk to a Republican, and we've incorporated all of their ideas or suggestions that they came up with at the hearings that Ways and Means Committee did have on Social Security in a bipartisan way. This isn't a partisan bill. This is an American bill. This is about the American people. There are more registered independents than there are registered Democrats or registered Republicans. This is about the American people, and that's who's going to benefit. And what it requires is a vote. And to your point, leadership on both sides has to be aware of the fact that this is a concern. If they're not, if everyone said, oh, no, we love Social Security, we want to protect it, we want to make sure that it's there, it's just that, and the excuses pour in.
But how do you get past that, though? How do you get past this idea that, no, how do you get lawmakers past that idea that they need to be brave or courageous or whatever it is and actually fix this and make decisions that are going to be painful?
I would say that that's the job of all the, now we have over 350 outside groups that support Social Security 2100. We need their voices. That's why we
do what? I feel like
Here's what we
I
have
hear
to
their
do.
voices.
I'll take Rich Neal, for example.
Oh, okay.
All right? So this is what I do for every single member of Congress. And so everybody in Congress, House and Senate, gets one of these. And what it does is say to them, here's what Social Security is doing in your district. It says for Rich Neal, he has 170,840 Social Security recipients just in his district. And then we break it down to what they receive in a pension, what they get for spousal and dependent coverage, and disability, which is equally as important. Is there anywhere in the private sector where you could possibly ever find an insurance policy even, where you could purchase something like this? No. I come from one of the insurance capitals of the world in Hartford. I went to the Aetna school where they talked about 3 legs on the stool, and the most solid leg of that stool, Social Security. And the only one that's never missed a payment, Social Security. But also what I want to draw attention to is we also say, how much money does this bring in to your district on a monthly basis? In Springfield, Massachusetts, in the, I forget which district, Rich is, I think it's the 9th or 10th. $276 million a month in a program that hasn't been enhanced in 52 years.
We just got one more minute, and then we are going to take some audience questions. Senator Cassidy said he doesn't think it's possible to see action on this in the next year. It is a presidential year. I know the site. We all know it. It's so annoying to me that I have to, as a reporter, say, oh, it's a presidential year. They can't get anything possibly done. It's ridiculous. But do you think, first of all, Democrats are...
So Senator Cassidy wasn't lobbying for the Profiles in Courage Award, I take it?
Well, I think anyone who puts out a plan on this issue has more courage than others, I will say. But this is my question to you. Democrats could take over the House. That's something that I know you are hopeful about. When do you think there could be action on a bill, your bill, any bill? And just 30 seconds.
Says the next speaker will make this one of his top priorities. It will get a vote for sure. And he's already made that commitment. And I think as we go around the country and talk about this, but let's get back to your first question. And don't forget
audience questions also, yes.
Because I think that's so important. It's not Congress that has the courage. Congress has to hear from its constituency. And you ought to be saying loud and clear, why aren't you voting? And there's a lot of this idea that we need to study this. Are you kidding me? Listen, let's be brutally honest. There's only two ways to go with this. You are either going to cut benefits or increase revenues. It's not that. You don't need to study that, and they've looked at it. Now, there's some other creative things you might be able to do, but it all boils down to that at the end of the day. So what's your plan, and when are you going to vote on it?
All right, let me get to some audience questions.
Okay.
I think it's a good time to also tell people that this is a former high school teacher. I don't know if you picked up on those vibes, and coach. So he definitely knows how to get across a good lesson, including complicated math that sounds simple. But yes, over here, our first question. Please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, sure. My name is Alan Murray. I'm a member of the AARP All-Voluntary Board of Directors. And perhaps most importantly, I'm a resident of the great state of Connecticut.
All right.
And we got a few others in here, ladies. Yeah, okay, good. So thank you, first of all, for being here. Thank you for focusing on this important issue. As you know very well, the AARP has long called on Congress to act on Social Security, do it sooner rather than later, and do it in a bipartisan manner. Can you talk a little bit more about how important you think bipartisanship is and what the process is of getting from your bill to a bill that can gather bipartisan support?
Well, I think our bill does have bipartisan support because of all the Republican initiatives, including former chair of the committee, Tom Reed, Tom Rice, Vern Buchanan, all of these issues that people agree on, we've included in Social Security 2100. But if your leadership and others say, well, anything that has taxes in it, we can't be for. How do you get beyond that? And basically what they're saying, unless there's cuts to the program, we can't be for it. Now, I think there are ways to get greater efficiencies out of it, but try this on for size. Some of you are familiar with insurance lingo, et cetera. Social Security has a 99% loss ratio. Now, when you hear that, everyone goes, well, what does that mean? Well, that's insurance lingo for meaning they operate the largest federal government program for less than 1%. And you have colleagues of ours, including the Republican Study Committee, that are calling to cut Social Security administration, when in fact, we should be enhancing it. Can you find any industry, private sector, or governmental that could run a system that delivers disability, spousal, dependent coverage, and a pension, and services the American people? You can't. So this is something we should be glorifying. And instead of saying, when you say bipartisan, Mark Meadows said the best thing to me. He says, oh my God, I'm from rural North Carolina. And at the time he was in the Freedom Caucus. He says, your bill gets to the floor, we're all voting for it. And that's the key. You watch how bipartisan it comes when you have to vote on it. But if you never put forward a proposal, you never submit anything in writing, you never provide the public with anything they have to look at and say, oh, well, it's not bipartisan, that's an excuse.
Congressman, I'm going to get
How
to
about
another.
a vote?
Sorry. Next audience question.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good morning, Congressman. My name is Myrtle Haversham. I am a proud AARP member and serve as the state president for AARP Georgia. So thank you again for being here. Did I hear a yay for Georgia? My question deals with net investment income. It's my understanding that your proposal is to tax net investment income for Social Security. And you know, in the past, it's basically been primarily based on wages paid. So
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to take this approach?
Let me give credit to President Biden here because he's the one who pointed out in both of our revenue payers, one, to lift the cap on people over 400,000 are targeted at individuals who are done paying into Social Security, in Bill Gates's case, on January 2nd, but we usually say February 28th. And then the second thing is that FICA, it's called a tax, but here's another thing. Are you serious? FICA is a tax? What tax do you know of that you get a pension benefit, a disability benefit, spousal and dependent coverage? There is none. And, oh, by the way, the business gets to write that portion off. But in FICA also, to avoid FICA taxes, wage taxes, people change the rules. So what the president has proposed is to eliminate that loophole and get that extra revenue into the system and of FICA. So it's directly related to wages, but it's based on people avoiding having to pay FICA taxes. And so what we're suggesting is, or what the president has suggested is you close that loophole. I agree with him. And it's a way to produce revenue because he made a commitment to say that no one earning under 400,000. Now let me see a show of hands. How many here are making over 400,000? You know, funny thing about that, I've yet to be in an audience where I've seen a hand go up from anyone when we mention this. It actually works out to be, from a wage standpoint, 0.6% of Americans, 0.6%. That's what we're asking to pay for this and close the FICA loophole. And what does that do? That allows us to pay for all of those benefit increases and get solvency to 2068. It's not 75 years, but also a wake-up call for Congress. This isn't something you vote on every 52 years. We have a subcommittee in Ways and Means that is focused on that. The Senate Finance Committee has a committee. Should be on them all the time. What are you doing about Social Security? We've got to fix this.
And I should mention, you are the ranking Democrat on that subcommittee,
Yes, I
are you
am.
not? I think we are hearing very loud and clear a wake-up call today in this conversation. Congressman John Larson, I think we could spend an hour more easily discussing this, but I want to thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. And let me just say this. AARP is the signature organization for older Americans. Social Security, the #1 anti-poverty program for the elderly, and the #1 anti-poverty program for children. Speak out, scream, tell members of Congress, we need you to vote. Don't fall for the, well, I'd like to, but we got to have this bipartisan. We're not going to join on to it, but vote. If you got a better idea, that's why they have conference committee. That's why we have compromises. But if you're not going to vote and you're not going to put something in writing in front of you to say, well, can I see your plan? Well, it's too complicated. We're not going to be able to do that. We need to go behind closed doors and have a double secret probation meeting. And when we come out, we'll tell you what's in on it. But then it can't be amended and it'll be an up or down vote. That's not a democracy.
I stand outside a lot of those meetings. I know what you're
It's
talking
not
about.
a
Thank you,
democracy.
Congressman Larson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. There we go. And I want to thank all of you for being here to a deep conversation about a complicated problem. Thanks to everyone watching. And also, of course, thank you, Joanne, for the introduction. And now to finish things up, it's my pleasure to introduce Lloyd Johnson.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. We want to thank Senator Cassidy and Congressman Larson for coming to speak with us today and for putting forth bold ideas in the pursuit of a solution to address Social Security's challenges. And I want to thank the volunteers who came from across the country and those who joined us virtually to help us demonstrate how important it is that Americans be part of the conversation about how to protect Social Security now and in the future. I also want to thank Lisa DeJordan for moderating the discussion. Thank you very much. Well done. Two things are evident from what we heard today. First, the importance of this program. Social Security is a crucial pillar of American society. Money Americans have earned through years of hard work. Social Security plays a critical role in their well-being in retirement. Second, the complexity. The challenges facing Social Security are complex. There are no simple solutions, and building the consensus necessary to pass lasting protections for America's most valued program will require political will and courage. Importantly, there's a role for all Americans to play. We must stay engaged and informed about the full range of options to ensure that the money Americans have earned is there when they retire. We must make sure our voices are heard. AARP is committed to fighting to protect and save Social Security now and in the future. Our state offices and volunteers across the country are working to educate and inform all Americans about their Social Security. This event is just one of many. We will keep you informed and up to date on future events. In a country divided on so many issues, Social Security is a unifying program with broad support across the political spectrum. Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike deeply value Social Security. And AARP will continue to encourage members of Congress to come together to find a path forward. AARP remains unwavering in our commitment to protecting Social Security. We know you and your families are counting on us to fight for you, and we will not let you down. And I want to thank each of you for coming. This concludes our program for today. Thank you very much.